If you're reading this, I'm still alive. Dorothy Ann Thibodeau had 72 hours to convince someone, anyone, that those 7 words were true, or she would vanish into a locked memory care facility 3 states away, where even her real name would disappear. In just 4 days, her daughter Karen would complete what she'd started 18 months ago, erasing her mother from existence while collecting $4,800 every month from a woman the government believed was dead. The next 6 minutes would determine if Dorothy died forgotten in Arkansas, or if one Christmas card would trigger the largest elder protection operation Louisiana had seen in years. This is where impossible meets inevitable. Before we continue, from our family to yours, we wish you a warm and safe Christmas. But remember, not everyone is safe this holiday season. Please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. Marcus Thunder Boudreaux wasn't looking for a mission that December afternoon. He was 58 years old, president of the Bayou Brothers chapter, and emotionally exhausted. The second-floor hallway of Serenity Pines nursing home smelled like every facility he'd learned to hate. Disinfectant trying to cover something sadder. Marcus gently adjusted his mother's pillow for the 3rd time. Anne was retelling the story of the 1965 hurricane, a story Marcus had heard 1,000 times. But he didn't interrupt. He held her hand, nodding at all the right beats. He was tired, yes, but not because he wanted to escape the antiseptic smell of the room. He was tired from the weight of love, the helpless feeling of watching the strongest woman he knew look so small in a hospital bed. Outside, he was a Hell's Angel president. In here, he was just a son trying to hold on to his mother's memories. The wheelchair squeaked before he saw it. That specific sound, left wheel, probably needs oil, the kind of detail you notice when you've spent too many hours in places like this. An aide was pushing an elderly woman back from physical therapy, and Marcus stepped aside to let them pass. Standard visiting hours protocol. He didn't mean to look at her face, but Dorothy Thibodeau looked at his. Her hand shot out with surprising strength for someone so frail. She pressed something into Marcus's palm. Rough paper, slightly damp from her grip, and her ink-stained fingers trembled against his for maybe 3 seconds. Their eyes locked. 5 feet 1 inch of desperation looking up at a man who'd built walls specifically to avoid moments like this. "Mrs. Thibodeau, we talked about this," the aide said, not unkindly. "You can't give things to visitors." Dorothy's lips moved. No sound, just the shape of a word. "Please." The wheelchair squeaked away down the hallway, the aide apologizing over her shoulder. "Dementia, sorry. She does this with everyone." Marcus stood there holding a Christmas card. Generic drugstore design. Santa and reindeer, the kind you buy in bulk for $4.99. His first instinct was to throw it away. His second was to open it. And that's the one that changed everything. When Marcus opened the envelope, a scent hit him before he saw anything. It wasn't the chemical smell of the hospital. It was the scent of an old cedar chest, of yellowed Bible pages preserved for decades. A pressed violet fell into his calloused palm. The petal was thin as a cicada's wing, the purple faded to earth brown. It smelled faintly of dried lavender and thyme, a tiny, fragile witness to a life that someone was trying to erase. A violet, maybe, pressed flat and forgotten. He unfolded the card and read the handwriting, shaky but deliberate, each letter formed with the kind of concentration that comes from absolute necessity. "If you're reading this, I'm still alive. My name is Dorothy Ann Thibodeau. They told my family I died 18 months ago. Christmas 2023. Funeral they never had. I'm in room 347C. I write these cards because I have no phone. I pressed this flower because I used to press them with my grandson Jacob. The flower is dead, but I'm not. Please check. Please. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry for bothering you. If I'm right, I'm running out of time. She's moving me somewhere on December 26th. Merry Christmas. Please check. At the bottom, in smaller print, this is card number 47. I've been writing for 63 days. Marcus read it twice. His walls went up immediately. This facility had 240 beds, dozens of dementia patients who believed their families had abandoned them, who invented elaborate stories to explain why no one visited. He'd learned not to get involved in every sad tale. You couldn't save everyone. The system was broken, and one man couldn't fix it, even if he wore a Hell's Angels vest and had 172 brothers behind him. He looked down the hallway where the wheelchair had disappeared. The squeak was gone now, just fluorescent lights and that smell. His mother's room was 20 feet away. Anne Boudreau looked up from her hospital bed when Marcus walked in, and she knew her son's face well enough to see the war happening behind his eyes. "What's wrong, baby?" He handed her the card without speaking. She read it slowly. She'd been needing reading glasses more lately, something that terrified Marcus more than he'd admit, and when she looked up, her expression had shifted from concern to recognition. "That's Dorothy, room 347. We talk sometimes when they bring us down for therapy together." "You know her?" "Thunder, baby. That woman is sharp as a tack. She remembers my grandkids' names after I mentioned them once. She asks me about you, about the chapter. Last week she recited a poem she taught her second graders in 1987. Anne tapped the card. "This isn't dementia. This is someone trapped." Marcus felt something crack in the walls he'd built. "You're absolutely sure?" "I've had dementia patients in my family. My Aunt Marie, your grandmother toward the end. I know what it looks like when someone's mind is going." Anne held up the card. "Dorothy's mind is fine. Her situation is not." The clock on the wall read 3:22 p.m. If the card was right, if this wasn't some elaborate confusion or misunderstanding, someone had 96 hours and 38 minutes until December 26th. 4 days until a woman vanished into a system that had already declared her dead once. Marcus looked at his mother. "I need to talk to her. Can you stay here for a bit?" "Baby, I'm not going anywhere." Anne squeezed his hand. "But Thunder? Whatever you find, you call the brothers. Don't you try to fix this alone." Room 347C was at the end of the hallway they called Section C, the forgotten wing, where the fluorescent lights seemed dimmer and the air smelled more like defeat than disinfectant. Marcus had been down this hallway exactly twice in the 3 weeks his mother had been here, both times by accident. There was no common area access back here, no windows with natural light, just rooms where families didn't visit. The door was cracked open. He knocked. 2 women looked up. One was maybe 79, sitting in the chair by the window with a magazine. The other was smaller, frailer, perched on the edge of her bed with a pen in her ink-stained hand and another blank Christmas card in front of her. Number 48, probably. Dorothy Thibodeau's eyes went wide when she saw his vest. Hope and fear mixing in equal measure. "Ma'am, I'm Marcus Boudreau. You gave me a card about 5 minutes ago." He stayed in the doorway, kept his voice gentle. "I'm going to check your story. If you're telling the truth, I'm going to help you. But I need you to answer something first. Are you absolutely sure you're right about this?" The pen fell from Dorothy's hand. Her roommate, Helen, according to the nameplate, stood up slowly, watching. Dorothy's voice came out steady despite the trembling in her fingers. "Sir, I taught elementary school for 38 years at Thibodeau Elementary. I graded over 10,000 papers. I can tell you which students struggled with multiplication tables in 1989. I remember my wedding day. July 14th, 1965, First Baptist Church. I wore my mama's dress. I remember my husband Claude's last words before his heart gave out 6 years ago. I'll see you soon, Cher. I remember my daughter Karen telling me I needed to sign papers just in case. And I remember the exact day she stopped visiting, March 19th, 2023. I'm 82 years old. My body is failing. My mind is not. Helen spoke up from the window. You asked if she's sure. I'll tell you something. I've been her roommate for 11 months. She's the sanest person in this entire building. She remembers every nurse's name, every medication schedule, every time they change the menu. And she's terrified. Whatever you're going to do, sir, do it fast. They're moving her in 4 days. Marcus stepped fully into the room. The cards taped to the wall caught his eye. Dozens of them. All Christmas designs, all with Dorothy's shaky handwriting visible through the paper. 47 attempts to reach someone who would listen. He asked the question he didn't want to ask. Why would your daughter do this? Dorothy's face crumbled. First time she'd said it out loud, probably. Because I'm worth more dead than alive, and because I was stupid enough to give her permission to decide for me. That sentence hit Marcus like a physical blow. His own mother, the woman who'd raised him through hurricane seasons and Coast Guard deployments, had nearly died in this very facility before he'd fought hard enough to get her proper care. He'd spent 11 months searching for her after Katrina, following paper trails across 3 states while the system treated her like a misplaced file folder. He knew exactly what it felt like to lose someone the system had erased. He pulled out his phone and took a photo of the card Dorothy had given him. Then he handed it back. Keep this. You're going to give this to your grandson Jacob yourself. That's a promise. He turned to Helen. You're a witness. If anything happens to her in the next 4 days, anything at all, you call this number. He handed her his business card. Hell's Angels Bayou Brothers Chapter. President Marcus Boudreaux, with his cell number below. Day or night, doesn't matter. Back to Dorothy, whose tears were falling now. Not sad tears. Relief tears. Ma'am, I can't promise this will be easy. The legal system moves slow, and we've got maybe 72 hours before that transfer deadline. But I promise you this. You will not get on that van to Arkansas on December 26th. And your family will know you're alive, one way or another. Dorothy's voice broke. I prayed someone would check. 47 cards. You're the first person who believed me. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. I'm not just someone, ma'am. I'm a Hell's Angel, and I've got 172 brothers who are about to become very interested in your daughter's story. He left room 347C at 3:48 p.m., December 22nd. By 5:00 p.m., every member of the Bayou Brothers chapter would know Dorothy Thibodeau's name. The countdown had begun. The clubhouse was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all exposed brick and steel beams, with enough parking for 200 motorcycles and a meeting room that could hold the entire chapter when needed. Marcus called the emergency session for 5:00 p.m. sharp. No exceptions, no excuses. By 4:55, bikes were rolling in from across the parish. Brothers who'd been at work, at home, at their kids' Christmas programs. When Thunder called an emergency session 4 days before Christmas, you showed up. Carlos Anvil Mendoza arrived first. 52 years old, former FBI Financial Crimes Division, with the kind of face that had seen too many bad people get away with too much. He found Marcus in the war room, the back office where they kept the computers and the case files, staring at Dorothy's Christmas card. Talk to me, Anvil said. Marcus handed him the card. Tell me if I'm crazy. Anvil read it. His expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the paper. You verified this? My mother knows her, says she's sharp. Roommate confirmed. I looked her in the eyes, Anvil. That's not dementia. That's someone who's been screaming for 18 months and nobody heard. If this is real, it's real. Then we're talking federal charges, Social Security fraud, Medicare fraud, elder financial abuse, forgery, possibly conspiracy. Anvil pulled out his phone. I've got contacts at the Bureau. If there's a death certificate filed, I can access it. If benefits are still being collected, that's a paper trail. How long? To confirm? Give me 3 hours. To build a prosecutable case? Anvil met his eyes. We've got until December 26th. More brothers arrived. Wei Granite Chen, 47, ER nurse with 23 years of experience, still wearing his scrubs from the shift he'd just left. Jamal Sentinel Washington, 44, former high school counselor who ran grief support groups now. Ahmed Razor Hassan, 39, digital forensics specialist who'd caught his own aunt stealing from family. Thomas Clutch Thibodeau, 51, New Orleans Fire Department, who'd carried elderly residents down 6 flights during Katrina flooding. Marcus waited until they were all seated. 23 brothers in the room, the core leadership and specialists who handled the chapter's Elder Watch program. He held up Dorothy's card. Her name is Dorothy Ann Thibodeau, 82 years old, retired teacher, widow, 3 kids, 7 grandkids. They all think she's been dead for 18 months. They had a funeral. They grieved. They moved on. He let that sink in. Except she's not dead. She's in room 347C at Serenity Pines, right down the hall from my mother. And her daughter Karen has been collecting her Social Security and pension the entire time, $4,800 a month, while keeping her locked in the forgotten wing where nobody visits. Granite leaned forward. You sure she's competent? Not trying to doubt you, but dementia patients sometimes. She recited her wedding date, her husband's last words, and which students struggled with math in 1989. My mother talks to her twice a week. The woman is sharp. Marcus tapped the card. She's been writing these to strangers because her daughter disconnected her phone, intercepted her mail, and told the staff she has dementia. This is card number 47. The room went silent. Clutch spoke up, his Cajun accent thick. Thibodeau, that's family to me. Probably distant, but family. What's the timeline? Daughter's transferring her to Arkansas on December 26th. Locked memory care facility, cash payments, no questions asked. If she gets there, we'll never find her. They're putting her in under a false name. Sentinel, the counselor, closed his eyes briefly. Arkansas facility. That's where families send people they want to forget. She won't survive 6 months. Then we've got 72 hours to make sure she doesn't get there. Marcus looked around the room. I need to know right now. Who's in? Nobody spoke for exactly 3 seconds. Then Anvil stood up. Financial forensics. I'll pull her records tonight. Granite. Medical assessment. If she's malnourished or neglected, I'll document it. Razor. Digital trail. If the daughter's been emailing or texting about this, I'll find it. Clutch. Facility inspection. I'll use fire code as cover, see what they're hiding. Sentinel. Family counseling. When we find her real kids, they're going to need help processing this. One by one, every brother in that room stood up. No speeches. No grandstanding. Just quiet commitment. Marcus felt something in his chest. The same thing he'd felt 11 months into searching for his mother after Katrina, the moment he'd finally found her file in a facility in Alabama. That mix of rage and determination that came from knowing the system had failed. But people wouldn't. All right, here's how this works. Anvil, you run point on financial investigation. I want bank records, death certificates, insurance claims, everything. Granite, you get into that facility tomorrow and assess Dorothy. Razor, I need you to pull every digital footprint Karen's left. Clutch, use your fire department credentials to inspect Serenity Pines. Find me leverage. He pulled up a map on the wall screen. Dorothy's son Mark lives in Houston, daughter Lisa in Tampa. We need to locate them, verify they really think their mother's dead, and get them here before Christmas. Sentinel, you coordinate that with support teams. Anvil was already on his laptop. Got a hit. Dorothy Ann Thibodeau, death certificate filed August 14th, 2023. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Signed by Dr. Raymond Chen, neurologist, and Morris Guidry, funeral director at Eternal Rest Funeral Home. Bank records? Give me 20 minutes. Marcus turned to the room. Listen up. This is a race against the clock, and we're playing by the rules. No threats, no intimidation, no cowboy moves. We document everything. We coordinate with law enforcement, and we build a case that sticks. Dorothy's already been invisible for 18 months. We're going to make her seen. What about the daughter? Someone asked. Karen Marie Thibodeau Broussard, 52. Real estate agent. Lives in Lakeview. Marcus pulled up a photo from public records. Professional headshot, polished smile, pearl necklace. She's hosting a Christmas memorial dinner tomorrow at 2 p.m. Family gathering to remember dear Mom, while actual Mom is 12 miles away writing cards to strangers. The room's temperature seemed to drop. So what's the play? Granite asked. We crashed that dinner, with Dorothy, and her real family, and enough evidence to make federal charges stick. Marcus looked at the clock. 5:47 p.m. We've got 67 hours and 13 minutes. Let's get to work. If you believe the elderly deserve protection, comment "Protect our elders" and subscribe, because what happens next proves exactly why systems need people brave enough to break through red tape when lives are on the line. Hour 8, December 22nd, 11:47 p.m. Anvil was 3 drinks of coffee deep into the financial forensics when the pattern emerged. His laptop screen glowed blue in the clubhouse's back office, spreadsheets and bank statements filling multiple windows. Marcus stood behind him, watching the numbers tell their story. Got it, Anvil said quietly. Dorothy's Social Security deposits, $1,870 monthly, hitting an account in Karen's name. Started in August 2023, same month as the alleged death. 18 consecutive months. That's $33,660, right there. Pension? Teacher's Retirement Fund, $2,930 monthly, same account. Anvil's fingers moved across the keyboard. But here's where it gets interesting. Medicare reimbursements for prescription medications, $340 per month, also depositing to Karen. Except, he pulled up another window. Serenity Pines pharmacy records show Dorothy's medications discontinued 11 months ago. Karen's been billing Medicare for drugs her mother never received. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Total monthly fraud? $5,140 in benefits alone. Times 18 months? Anvil calculated. $92,520 stolen through benefit fraud. Add in the life insurance payout, I found the claim $50,000 and the house sale at $340,000. He looked up. We're north of $500,000. Can you prove it? Bank records don't lie. I've got the deposits time-stamped, every transaction after the fake death certificate. And thunder. Anvil's expression darkened. This isn't her first attempt. I found 2 other elderly clients from Karen's real estate business. Similar patterns. Power of attorney, sudden decline, suspicious financial activity. Both cases died, literally, before anyone investigated. The second victim reveal hit Marcus like ice water. She's done this before. Tried to. One victim actually did die of natural causes before she could complete the scheme. Another family caught on early, filed complaints. but Karen claimed misunderstanding and returned some money. No charges filed. Anvil closed his laptop. Dorothy's the one that worked, and Karen's been perfecting it for 18 months. Hour 16, December 23rd, 7:14 a.m. Granite walked into Serenity Pines wearing his hospital ID and carrying a medical bag. The night shift administrator barely looked up. Wei Chen, Mercy Hospital ER. We're doing a community health assessment for elderly patients. Standard screening, vitals, medication review, cognitive function. Should only take a few hours. The administrator waved him through. Section C needs the most help. Nobody visits back there. Dorothy's room was exactly where Marcus said it would be. She was awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, writing another card. Number 49, probably. Her hands trembled when she saw his vest under his medical coat. Mrs. Thibodeau, I'm Wei. Friends call me Granite. Marcus sent me to check on you. The pen clattered to the floor. He believed me? Ma'am, we all believe you, and I need to document your condition for the legal case. Is that all right? Helen, the roommate, stood up from her chair. I'll tell you what's wrong. They've been starving her for 11 months. Granite spent 40 minutes conducting a thorough assessment. Blood pressure, low but stable. Weight, 97 pounds, down from 120 18 months prior. Signs of malnutrition, brittle nails, thinning hair, muscle wasting. Cognitive function, perfect. Dorothy recited her grandchildren's names, birthdays, and current grades in school. Your daughter claimed you have dementia, Granite said gently. My daughter is a liar. Dorothy's voice was steady. And I can prove it. Under my mattress. There's a journal. The journal was 3 months of daily entries. Dates, times, conversations, medication schedules. Everything documented in Dorothy's careful handwriting. Evidence that her mind was sharp even as her body weakened. Mrs. Thibodeau, I need you to understand something. This documentation is going to help, but we're in a race against time. That transfer to Arkansas. December 26th, 9 a.m. I know. Dorothy gripped his hand with surprising strength. I'm not getting on that van. I'd rather die right here. You're not dying anywhere, ma'am. We've got 173 brothers working on this. Helen spoke up from the doorway. You want to know what really happened? I'll tell you. I've watched everything. Witness testimony number 1. Helen Kowalski, 79, nursing home roommate. Helen didn't sit down. She stood by the window, arms crossed, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 11 months watching her friend suffer. I moved into this room in January. Dorothy was already here, but she wasn't like the others in this wing. She talked normal, remembered things, asked me about my grandchildren, remembered their names the next day. But she was writing these cards, hundreds of them, and I thought maybe she was just lonely, you know? Old people do crafts. Helen's hands tightened on the windowsill. Then in March, I saw her staring at her phone, except the phone was disconnected. I asked what was wrong and she showed me something on my phone, her own obituary, Times-Picayune online. Dorothy Ann Thibodeau died peacefully, survived by loving daughter Karen. I thought it was some kind of mistake. What did Dorothy say? Granite asked. She said, it's not a mistake. My daughter killed me on paper so she could steal my money. And then she cried for 3 hours. Not loud. She couldn't risk the nurses hearing. Just quiet. Broken crying. Helen pulled a tissue from her pocket. Not for tears, but to grip something. I've been in nursing homes before. I know what dementia looks like. My own husband had it for 6 years before he passed. Dorothy doesn't have dementia. Dorothy has a daughter who's a thief and a liar, and I've been watching her waste away for 11 months because nobody would listen. Did you try to help? I told my daughter Brenda. She's a documentary filmmaker. She didn't believe it at first, But then she came to visit, and she saw how sharp Dorothy is, how the staff treats her like she's invisible, how her chart says dementia risk when there's no dementia here. Helen's voice hardened. Brenda brought a recorder on her last visit. She caught something you need to hear. Hour 24, December 23rd, 3:20 p.m. Razor sat in his van outside Serenity Pines with enough electronic equipment to run a small surveillance operation. His laptop showed 3 windows: Karen's email account, accessed through password recovery, her cell phone records, subpoenaed through Anvil's law enforcement contacts, and the nursing home's internal server, legally accessed through Clutch's fire inspection credentials. The deleted emails told the story Karen thought she'd erased. March 15th, 2024. Karen to administrator. Mother becoming more vocal about family contact. Recommend restricting her access to common areas and visitor logs. Will increase monthly payment to $2,800 to compensate for additional security measures. November 3rd, 2024. Karen to administrator. Volunteer. Barbara Williams continues to be a problem. She called my brother asking questions. I need her banned from facility immediately. Will handle family personally. December 8th, 2024. Administrator to Karen. Per your request, transfer to Arkansas arranged for Deck 26. They accept cash payment and don't verify identity for memory care patients. Your mother will be in secured wing, no outside contact. Razor documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, metadata, the kind of evidence that made prosecutors smile. But the recording Brenda had captured was the nuclear option. Recorded evidence, December 20, 2024. Brenda had hidden a voice recorder in her jacket pocket during a routine visit to see her mother Helen. She'd arrived just as Karen was meeting with the nursing home administrator in the hallway outside Dorothy's room. The audio quality was clear. Administrator. Mrs. Broussard, your mother keeps telling people she's alive, that you held a fake funeral. We had a volunteer call your siblings asking questions. Karen. That's the dementia talking. I've told you she has delusions. You need to restrict her visitor access completely and transfer her to the memory care unit, the locked one. Administrator. The memory care unit requires an actual dementia diagnosis. The neurologist's evaluation is, it's thin. Karen. Long pause. How much would it cost to make that evaluation more comprehensive? Administrator. Mrs. Broussard. Karen. I'm asking a business question. I pay you $2,400 a month for her care. I could pay $3,000 if her security needs require it. The memory unit has better privacy. No volunteers wandering in. No chatty roommates. You understand? Administrator. The Arkansas facility you mentioned. They have a memory unit. Locked. Very private. They take transfer patients with simplified paperwork. Karen. When can we move her? Administrator. After the holidays? Less conspicuous. December 26th? Karen. Perfect. Make sure she's medicated for the transfer. I don't want her talking to anyone. When Razor played the recording for Marcus at hour 36, the room went silent. That wasn't just fraud. That was conspiracy, bribery, and unlawful restraint caught on tape. Get this to the prosecutor, Marcus said. Now. Hour 36, December 23rd, 11:52 p.m. Clutch walked through Serenity Pines like he owned it, which in a technical sense he did. Fire marshals have override authority during safety inspections. He wore his NOFD uniform and carried a clipboard, checking exit signs and sprinkler systems and finding violations everywhere. Section C, the Forgotten Wing, was a fire marshal's nightmare. Exit blocked by storage carts, Emergency lighting non-functional. Sprinkler system last inspected 14 months ago, currently showing maintenance required warnings. He documented all 17 violations with photos and timestamps. But the real discovery was the medication log. In the nursing station, while the night shift nurse went to answer a call light, Clutch photographed Dorothy's chart. Medications discontinued. Diabetes medication, insulin, blood pressure medication, lisinopril, arthritis pain management, meloxicam, multivitamin supplements. Discontinuation date, February 2024. Reason given, patient refusing medication. Except Dorothy's journal showed she'd been begging for her medications. The facility had discontinued them to cut costs, pocketing the difference while still billing Medicare. Clutch sent the photos to Anvil's encrypted server and walked out of Serenity Pines at 1:14 a.m. with enough evidence to shut the facility down. Witness Testimony 2. Robert Tran, 34, pharmacy delivery driver. They found Robert at his apartment in Metairie at hour 42. He answered the door with a pizza in one hand and suspicion on his face, until he saw the vests. "Bayou Brothers? What did I—" "You deliver medications to Serenity Pines 3 times a week," Anvil said. "Dorothy Thibodeau, room 347C. What can you tell us about her prescriptions?" Robert's face changed. "You're here about her? Finally?" "Finally." He let them in and pulled out a notebook, handwritten logs of every delivery for 8 months. "I noticed something was wrong back in April. I'd deliver her medications to the facility, sign them in. But then Karen, the daughter, would show up and pick them up at the pharmacy counter, claiming she was taking them to her mother personally. Except her mother's medications were showing as discontinued in the facility system." Robert flipped through pages of notes. Dates, medication names, quantities. "I reported it to my supervisor twice. He said family arrangements aren't our business. But I'm a pharmacy tech. I know Medicare fraud when I see it. Karen was collecting reimbursements for medications that were never delivered. $340 a month for insulin, blood pressure meds, pain management. All of it going into her pocket." "Why'd you keep the log?" Marcus asked. "Because nobody else was paying attention. And because I saw Dorothy once when I was delivering to the wing. She looked at me like—" Robert's voice caught. "Like she was drowning and I was walking past with a life preserver. I couldn't help her directly. I'd lose my job. But I could document. So that's what I did." He handed the notebook to Anvil. "Every delivery, every pickup, 8 months of fraud. Is she okay?" "She will be," Marcus said. "Thanks to people like you who kept records when the system looked away." Witness Testimony Part 3. Barbara Jean Williams, 68, church volunteer. Barbara Jean came to the clubhouse herself at hour 48, brought by one of the brothers who'd tracked her down through St. Mary's Church volunteer registry. She walked in like she'd been waiting for this moment for 14 months. "I visit the forgotten ones," she said without preamble. "Every month through church ministry. The residents nobody else sees. Dorothy was on my list starting 14 months ago." She sat down at the table and pulled out a worn notebook. "First visit, November 2023. Dorothy was coherent, kind, asked about my grandchildren. She begged me to call her son Mark in Houston, gave me his number. I thought it was strange, family estrangement maybe, but I called." Barbara Jean's face hardened at the memory. Karen answered, "Screamed at me that her mother was dead, that I was harassing the family, that she'd get a restraining order if I called again. I was confused. Dorothy was sitting right there in that room, very much alive. So I called back the next month. Same response. Threats. Legal action. 7 months, Barbara Jean continued. I tried 7 times to reach that family. Every time Karen blocked me. She called my church, told the pastor I was harassing a grieving family with dementia-patient delusions. The church asked me to stop visiting Dorothy. She looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. I failed her. I knew something was wrong, and I let Karen bully me into silence. I've been praying someone else would check. Is it too late? Ma'am, we've got 24 hours until that transfer deadline. You didn't fail her. You're part of the chain that brought her to us. That notebook of yours? That's evidence. Barbara Jean handed it over. 14 months of visit dates, conversation notes, attempts to contact family, and Karen's threats documented in handwritten detail. Hour 60, December 25th, Christmas Day, 12:47 p.m. Sentinel stood in the Houston airport with Mark Thibodeau, who was still processing the news that his mother, whose funeral he'd attended 18 months ago, was alive. I saw her casket, Mark kept saying. I helped carry it. I gave a eulogy. Empty casket, Sentinel said gently. Your sister staged everything. We have the funeral director's confession. She paid him $3,000 to fake the cremation. Mark's wife held his hand, her face pale. Where is she now? Metairie. Same facility where she's been for 3 years. Karen's been visiting her regularly to make sure she stayed quiet. The flight to New Orleans had been delayed by weather, ice storm crossing Louisiana, but they'd landed just in time. Mark and his younger sister Lisa, who'd flown in from Tampa, were about to meet their supposedly dead mother. But first, they had a Christmas dinner to crash. Hour 67, December 25th, 6:34 p.m. Everyone expected chaos when 173 motorcycles rolled up to Karen's lakefront home. The neighbors certainly expected it. They'd called police at the first sound of engines. Inside, through the brightly lit living room window, Karen was raising a glass. She wore an elegant black dress, and around her neck was a triple-strand pearl necklace, the exact necklace Dorothy had worn in her 1965 wedding photo. Mom would have loved this soup, Karen said, her voice catching as she wiped a single, practiced tear from her cheek. The family nodded, sharing the grief, completely unaware that the woman wearing their mother's pearls had just signed the order to transfer her to a locked psychiatric unit to silence her forever. What they didn't expect was silence. The Bayou brothers formed a corridor from the street to Karen's front door. 2 lines, 86 men on each side, standing at parade rest in their vests. No revving engines, no shouting, no threats. Just the quiet presence of men who protected the vulnerable and confronted the guilty. Marcus walked up the center, flanked by Anvil and Granite. Behind them, in a wheelchair pushed by Mark and Lisa, came Dorothy Ann Thibodeau. They hadn't just taken her out of the nursing home. They had given her back her name. The faded open-back hospital gown, the uniform of the invisible, was gone. Instead, Dorothy sat upright in a navy blue floral dress, pinned with an old brooch that Helen, her roommate, had secretly tucked into her pocket. Her hair was combed. She wasn't patient 347C anymore. She was Mrs. Dorothy Ann Thibodeau, and she was coming to take back her life. Her ink-stained hands were folded in her lap, no longer gripping a pen. She looked terrified and determined in equal measure. Karen opened the door before they knocked. Her face went white. "Hello, baby," Dorothy said softly. "Merry Christmas." Behind Karen, voices from inside. "Who's at the door?" And, "Karen, everything okay?" And then sudden silence as family members came to see. Mark pushed forward. "Mom? Mom, oh my God, Mom!" Mark rushed forward, but he froze just before the wheelchair. He couldn't trust his eyes. Not until Dorothy reached out. Mark looked down at her hands. Those thin fingers were still stained with blue ink, the remnants of 47 days and nights of desperate writing. and on her right index finger, the familiar callus was still there, the mark of an elementary school teacher who had graded papers for 38 years. That wasn't a ghost. That was Mom. Those ink-stained hands were the loudest proof of her survival. Mark buried his face in her palms and broke. "We thought, Karen said you were—" "I know what she said." Dorothy's voice was stronger now. "She lied." Lisa came running from inside, mascara already running down her face. "Mama! Mama, how is this?" The family poured out onto the lawn. Cousins, grandchildren, extended family who'd all attended that funeral 18 months ago. All of them staring at a ghost made flesh. Karen tried to close the door. Anvil's boot stopped it. "Karen Marie Thibodeau Broussard. My name is Carlos Mendoza. I'm a retired FBI agent, and I'm here to inform you that federal investigators are currently reviewing evidence of Social Security fraud, Medicare fraud, elder financial abuse, forgery, bribery, and conspiracy." He handed her a document. "This is a court order blocking the transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. And this," he handed her a second document, "is a warrant for your arrest." Two sheriff's deputies stepped forward from the crowd of brothers. They'd been there the whole time, waiting with the evidence packets Anvil had prepared. "You have the right to remain silent," the deputy began, and Karen's legs went out from under her. She was cuffed on her own front lawn, in front of the family she'd lied to, while her supposedly dead mother watched from a wheelchair surrounded by Hell's Angels, and her real children. The mundane detail that would stick with witnesses. When they searched Karen's purse, she had her car keys in one hand and a Tupperware container of leftovers in the other. She'd been planning to take food home from the memorial dinner she'd hosted for the mother she was slowly killing. Back at the clubhouse at hour 70, Marcus stood with the core team reviewing the final evidence packet for the prosecutor. The charges were stacking up. Federal, Social Security fraud, 18 months, $33,660. Medicare fraud, 11 months, $3,740. Wire fraud, electronic transfer of stolen funds. State, elder financial abuse. Total theft, $560,320. Forgery, fake death certificate. Conspiracy, bribery of nursing home staff. Unlawful restraint, forced isolation and medication plan. Bail set at $500,000. Karen couldn't make it. She'd spent the money. Sentencing guidelines suggested 5 to 8 years federal prison, with additional state charges running consecutively. Anvil closed his laptop. "It's done. Prosecutor says it's the most documented elder abuse case he's seen. Every transaction, every email, every witness statement, it's airtight." Marcus looked at his brothers. "We did it in 72 hours. Actually," Razor checked his watch, 70 hours and 42 minutes. Transfer deadline's not till 9 a.m. tomorrow. Someone laughed, breaking the tension. But Marcus was thinking about Dorothy, currently at Mark's hotel being checked over by doctors, surrounded by grandchildren who'd thought they'd never see her again. Justice had been served. But justice was just the beginning. December 26th, 9 o'clock a.m. The time Karen had scheduled Dorothy's transfer to Arkansas. Instead, Dorothy was sitting in Mark's living room in Houston, surrounded by grandchildren she hadn't seen in 3 years, eating homemade pancakes her daughter-in-law had made. The ink stains on her hands were finally starting to fade. The logistics of rebuilding a life took work, but the Bayou brothers had 173 men who knew how to organize. Housing. Mark and his wife Sarah converted their first-floor office into a bedroom. Granite supervised the installation of grab bars in the bathroom, a medical alert system, and a ramp for the front entrance. Cost $4,200. The chapter's emergency fund covered it, while Dorothy's stolen assets were being recovered through the legal system. Financial. Anvil worked with federal prosecutors to freeze Karen's accounts and begin asset recovery. The house Dorothy had owned, sold for $340,000, was purchased by a shell company Karen had created. That company was now in receivership. The $98,920 in Karen's checking account was seized immediately. Social Security and pension payments were rerouted to Dorothy's new account within 48 hours. First direct deposit, $4,800, 18 months late. Legal. Karen's bail revocation hearing was January 8th. The evidence was so overwhelming her public defender was already negotiating a plea deal. Restraining order. Permanent. Dorothy would never have to see her daughter again, unless she chose to. Sentencing recommendation from prosecutors. 7 years federal, 4 years state, to run consecutively. 11 years total. Karen was 52. She'd be 63 when she got out, if she got out. Medical care. Granite arranged Dorothy's first post-rescue checkup with a geriatric specialist at Houston Methodist. The diagnosis: severe malnutrition, medication-controlled diabetes that had been uncontrolled for 11 months, and moderate osteoporosis. But her cognitive function? Perfect. The neurologist who examined her actually laughed when he read Karen's fake dementia diagnosis. "This woman could teach my medical students a lesson in recall," he said. Physical therapy started immediately. 3 sessions per week to rebuild muscle strength. Dorothy had lost 23 pounds in 18 months. The goal was to gain back 15 pounds in 6 months. By February, she'd already gained 8. Therapy of another kind started too. Sentinel connected Dorothy with a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery for elder abuse survivors. The first session was January 3rd. Dorothy cried for 40 minutes, not from sadness, but from relief. "I thought I was going crazy," she told the counselor. "Everyone said I had dementia, and I started wondering if they were right." "You weren't crazy," the counselor said. "You were being gaslit by someone who loved money more than she loved you. That's not your failure. That's hers." The brothers made sure Dorothy saw the difference between being trapped and being cared for. Small moments that rebuilt trust. Anvil drove Dorothy to her first court hearing, waiting in the hallway for 3 hours while she gave testimony. When she emerged shaking, he bought her coffee and sat with her in silence until she was ready to talk. Granite visited Houston twice in January to check her medication regimen and teach Mark how to monitor her blood sugar. He brought his own mother with him the second time. Ann Boudreau, recovered from her hip surgery, who sat with Dorothy and shared stories about the facility they'd both survived. Sentinel set up video calls between Dorothy and her extended family. Cousins she hadn't spoken to in years. Friends from her teaching days who'd thought she was dead. He sat with her during the first few calls, coaching her through the emotions of explaining what had happened. Razor helped Dorothy set up a new email account, a Facebook page to reconnect with old friends, and a simple smartphone she could actually use. He spent 2 hours teaching her how to video chat with her grandson Jacob, who lived in Denver. The first time Jacob's face appeared on screen, Dorothy touched the phone like it was a miracle. Clutch did something unexpected. He drove to Houston with a bag of pressed flowers, fresh violets, carefully preserved. "You said you used to press these with your grandson," he said. "Figured you might want to start again, but with living ones this time." Dorothy cried. Then she and Jacob spent an afternoon pressing flowers together over video chat, the way they used to when he was small. The dead flowers she'd put in those 47 cards had represented her dying hope. These living flowers represented something else, the possibility of growing again. Community integration. By February, Dorothy was volunteering at Jacob's School Library in Denver during her monthly visits. By March, she was reading to second graders, the same grade she'd taught for 38 years. The principal asked if she'd consider a permanent part-time position. Dorothy said yes. By April, she attended her first Bayou Brothers family cookout. Marcus introduced her as the woman who reminded us why we do this work. She met 40 other elderly residents the chapter had helped over the years. Some had been rescued from financial abuse, others from neglect. One woman, 76, had been helped escape an abusive adult son. They formed their own support group, Survivors Helping Survivors. The chapter started calling them the Guardian Angels. Dorothy's first birthday after her rescue was July 14th. She turned 83. Mark threw a party at his house, 60 people, 3 generations, including 23 Hells Angels wearing their vests. Dorothy wore a dress she'd picked out herself, ate cake she could actually taste now that her diabetes was controlled, and when someone asked her to make a wish, she said, "I don't need to. It already came true." The sensory anchor that had defined her captivity, those ink-stained hands, cramped from writing 47 desperate cards, was gone. Her hands were clean now. The indentation on her right index finger had faded. She didn't need to write SOS letters anymore. She could just write to people she loved, knowing they'd write back. But this story isn't really about one woman's rescue from a locked nursing home room. It's about what happened when other people saw that rescue and found the courage to speak up. Stage 5. Message, moral. 6 months after Dorothy's rescue, the Bayou Brothers' phone started ringing. The first call came from Shreveport. A woman named Patricia Dunn, 78, whose son had declared her dead 2 years ago while she was alive in a memory care facility. She'd seen Dorothy's story on the local news. Marcus had done one interview to raise awareness, and she'd asked a nurse to help her make the call. If it worked for her, Patricia said, maybe someone will believe me too. They did. The investigation found $340,000 in stolen benefits. Patricia's son was arrested within 72 hours. The second call came from Baton Rouge. Gerald Martinez, 81, a retired veteran whose daughter had faked his death to collect his military pension. 3 years of fraud, $180,000 stolen. He'd tried to report it to the VA twice. They'd told him there was no record of him in the system because he was deceased. Dorothy's case gave investigators a template for what to look for. Gerald's daughter was indicted on federal charges within a month. By August, 6 more families had come forward across Louisiana. The pattern was always the same. Adult children with financial problems, elderly parents with assets, fake death certificates, stolen benefits. The system had failed to catch it because who checks if dead people are really dead? Dorothy's case broke the dam. Because once one person's story goes public, others realize they're not alone. Statistical impact: within 6 months, 6 additional elder abuse cases prosecuted in Louisiana using Dorothy's case as a template, $1.2 million in stolen benefits recovered across all cases. 8. Adult children arrested for financial exploitation. Louisiana state legislature introduced the Dorothy's Law bill, requiring annual verification of death certificates against benefit payments. Serenity Pines Nursing Home lost its license after state investigation found 47 violations. Not just the 17, Clutch had documented 12 other facilities in Louisiana faced surprise inspections, resulting in 3 closures and 9 major compliance orders. Programmatic changes. Bayou Brothers Elder Watch Program expanded to 23 nursing homes across Louisiana. Anvil started teaching financial forensics workshops for adult protective services investigators. Granite created a medical assessment protocol now used by APS in 3 states. Sentinel's counseling model for reuniting families became standard training for Louisiana social workers. Personal transformation. Dorothy wasn't healed. Healing doesn't work like flipping a switch after 18 months of trauma. But she was safer. She was seen. She was believed. And that made all the difference. She still had nightmares about room 347C. She still flinched when someone mentioned nursing homes. But she also laughed at her grandson's jokes, baked cookies with her great-granddaughter, and attended church again. The same church where Barbara Jean had once volunteered, where Barbara Jean now hugged her every Sunday and apologized for not pushing harder. "You did push," Dorothy always told her. "You pushed enough that you were ready when someone listened." For the first time since March 2023, Dorothy felt safe enough to sleep without planning her next escape attempt. This story isn't about motorcycles or leather vests or the stereotypes people have about men who ride bikes and wear patches. It's about refusing to look away when the world says someone doesn't matter anymore. Here's what you need to understand. Dorothy isn't unique. Right now, in your town, on your street, there are elderly people trapped in situations where their families have decided they're more valuable for what they're worth than for who they are. Some are being financially exploited. Some are being neglected. Some are screaming for help, and everyone assumes it's dementia or confusion or just old age. The system isn't designed to catch this. Adult Protective Services is overworked and underfunded. Nursing homes have financial incentives to keep residents compliant and families happy. Banks don't cross-reference death certificates with active accounts. Social Security doesn't verify that the person receiving benefits is actually alive. The system relies on people, regular people like Barbara Jean, like Robert Tran, like Helen Kowalski, to notice and report and push back when something doesn't feel right. If you've ever felt invisible, know this. Dorothy wrote 47 cards to strangers before one person believed her. 47 attempts. Most of us would have stopped at 5. But she kept writing because she knew the alternative was disappearing forever. Your voice matters, even when it shakes. Your story matters, even when people say you're confused. If you've ever walked past someone who needed help, you don't need 200 motorcycles to change someone's story. You need one voice. Yours. You need the courage to ask uncomfortable questions. Are you safe? Might save a life. Something doesn't feel right here. Might trigger an investigation. I'm going to check on this. Might be the difference between someone dying alone and someone being rescued. Pay attention. When an elderly neighbor stops appearing at their window, ask why. When a friend mentions their parent suddenly developed dementia right after signing over power of attorney, verify it. When a nursing home staff member says, "The family doesn't visit anymore," wonder why. Listen when someone says, "My family thinks I'm dead." Even if it sounds impossible, check anyway. Dorothy pressed dead flowers into 47 cards because she'd given up on being rescued, but she refused to give up on being remembered. Those dead flowers were her way of saying, "I was here. I existed. Someone please notice." And someone did. The scariest-looking people in the room, the men in leather vests with patches and beards and bikes, were exactly who she needed. Because sometimes the system fails, and sometimes regular citizens have to step in, and sometimes the people society fears are the ones who show up to protect the vulnerable. 1 year after her rescue, Dorothy stood in front of the Louisiana State Legislature when they passed Dorothy's Law. She wore her best dress, the one she'd bought with her own money from her recovered benefits, and she read a statement she'd written herself. "My daughter tried to erase me from existence. She almost succeeded. But I'm still here because 173 strangers decided an old woman's life mattered. Because one man read a Christmas card from someone he'd never met and said, 'I'm going to check.' That's all it took. One person who cared enough to verify." She looked at the legislators. "I'm asking you to care enough to verify too. Check if the people you're sending benefits to are actually alive. Inspect the facilities where you're sending the vulnerable. Believe elderly people when they say something's wrong, even if their adult children say they're confused. We're not all confused. Some of us are just trapped." The bill passed unanimously. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Comment below. Protect our elders if you believe the vulnerable deserve more than the bare minimum the system provides. Share this video. You never know who needs to hear that their voice matters, that someone will believe them, that it's not too late to fight back. More stories of courage, justice, and people who refused to look away coming soon. Dorothy pressed one more flower after her rescue. A living violet, carefully preserved, placed in a card she sent to Marcus Boudreaux. The message inside read, "This flower is alive. So am I. Thank you for checking. Love, Dorothy." Marcus keeps that card in his office at the clubhouse. When brothers ask him why they do this work, why they spend hours investigating, why they mobilize 173 men for one elderly woman, why they can't just let the system handle it, he shows them that card. "Because the system didn't handle it," he says, "and because 47 attempts to get help shouldn't be what it takes. But if it does take 47 attempts, we're going to be the ones who show up on attempt 48. The dead flowers Dorothy once pressed represented her dying hope. The living flower she pressed after her rescue represents what happens when one person refuses to stop fighting and another person refuses to stop listening. That's not just Dorothy's story. That's the story we can all choose to write.